Hello, and welcome to Beyond Books, where we talk about books from Book of the Month Club and beyond. I'm your host. I'm Renee. This is Raina, my co host. And today we're going to do a book review of the Book of the Month for May that I received a couple of weeks ago at the beginning of the month, and that is called Middletide. It is by an author by the name of Sarah Crouch. So let's talk about this book. First of all, this is an early release. It will be available for purchase on June 11th of 2024. And it's also a debut novel for this author. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about who the author is. This is her. Again, her name is Sarah Crouch. And there's not really a whole lot about her here in the back of the book. It just says is known for her accolades in the world of athletics as a professional marathon runner. And she has had freelance work featured in Active Magazine, Competitive Magazine, and many other publications. So let's talk just a little bit about her running career. I looked up some information about it. And it looks like she was mainly a distance runner. So marathons, half marathons, 10Ks. She was an NCAA champion in college, and she qualified for the U.S. Olympic Marathon Trials in 2011 and 2012 in the 10,000 meter. And then she placed first at the Boulder 10K in 2014. And in 2015, she placed first at the Tallahassee Marathon in Florida. And her best marathon time was actually also in 2014. She placed sixth at the Chicago Marathon with a time of 2:32:44. So that's Sarah Crouch. Now, Middletide is mainly set in the 80s and the early 90s. The main character for the story is an author. He is named Elijah Leith. Elijah Leith. And he returns to a small town in the Pacific Northwest where he grew up. He had left the town in the early 70s to go to San Francisco and become a writer. He did get a book published. However, it didn't really sell very well. So he's had a book published, but not really a successful author. When he left town, he also left the love of his life behind there. And that's his high school sweetheart. Her name is Nikita Mills. And she is a Native American woman who lives on a fictitious reservation nearby the town. He actually returns to the cabin where he grew up. He has inherited it because his dad has recently passed. And so he still has feelings for Nikita upon his return. However, he's reluctant to speak with her because he had promised to meet her at a certain time and place after he initially left, and he didn't make it. So he feels guilt and shame about that. But he does get involved with another woman in town, and she's a doctor who has lived there for some time, but she didn't grow up in the town. And so when a murder happens, there are some similarities between that actual crime and one that Elijah wrote about in his book, which is titled Middletide. So due to these similarities and other circumstances around the crime, he does end up getting arrested for it. So that's what I'm going to tell you about the story. That's kind of the setting. What I liked was kind of the atmosphere and flavor of the story. I liked the small town feel and the kind of like live off the land, old fashioned values, kind of the time and place of the story, I guess is the way I would phrase it. I like the characters. I cared about them and I cared about what happened to them. Um, but the story itself was kind of just average for me. There was nothing really that I would say was special about it that stands out, in any way. The genre is crime fiction, so there's a lot that you have to accept that is, kind of coincidental, sort of. I don't think that's necessarily unusual for this type of fiction, but I do see that it could be one of the reasons why sometimes people will say that they don't want to read fiction. Um, it's also a bit awkward to read in the sense that it starts out with a prologue, which is Nikita and Elijah meeting in the woods just a few days before he leaves. And that's when they promise to return a few years later and meet each other again in the woods at a certain date and time. Then the book jumps to 1994 when the crime occurs. Then it returns back to the late 80s, which is when Elijah actually returns to that town. So at that point, then it goes back and forth, late 80s, and then, kind of the early mid 90s when the crime happened until it sort of compresses into, what is the end of the story when all the events kind of settle down and everything is done and worked out at the end of the story. So it just seems like a bit much of going back and forth. So it's a bit, I think it's a bit awkward. In the end, I would give this book 3.4 stars. It's entertaining. It's got some very sweet moments to it. The characters are likable, but the plot and the crime are a little bit contrived for me. Now, there are no reviews on it on Amazon. It is a pre-order there. But on Goodreads, it has a 3.7. And a surprising number of reviews for an early release. It has over 250. So that seems like a lot of reviewers, and it seems like many of them actually had criticisms that are similar to what I just said. One person made the comment that it was a wonderful audiobook, and I thought, yeah, it probably would be a good book to take on a walk or to the beach, take out to the gym, things like that. Something light that you don't really expect too much of. So, okay, that's my review. So, who's ready for live stream tomorrow? Friday, May 17th at 7 p.m. Our topic will be genres, the good, the great, and the get out of town. I'll post reminders for everyone. And as a preview, let's just talk about genres for just a second. A genre is defined as a specific style or kind of writing. Pretty simple, pretty open. So how many genres do you think there are? Well, it's a good question because it depends who you talk to. Generally, there are like 4 main literary genres: drama, fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. But then other genres, such as, say, comedy versus tragedy, are like subgenres under the genre of drama. Under fiction, you might have action adventure versus fantasy, as an example. And poetry even has subgenres such as like epic, dramatic, limerick. Okay, so most websites say that there are around 35 popular genres and that there are 50 genres in total. And the exact number depends on who you ask. If you take subgenres into account, over on Readsy Discovery, which is another website for reading. I don't know if anybody has ever been on there, but there are 107 different categories there. And Amazon, believe it or not, has 16,000 different genres or categories. So, I mean, I don't know. You can get quite a range there. And I guess I always sort of thought that somehow this relates, and this is just in my mind, somehow this relates to the Dewey Decimal System and how a library might categorize their books. But now that I'm looking at this more closely, no, not so much. I really don't think that the two can be compared. I think it's kind of apples and oranges, but yeah, I don't know. Let's talk about that. It sounds like there's going to be a lot to talk about. So join me if you can tomorrow night, May 17th. It's a Friday, 7 p.m. Pretty easy to remember. So I want to thank you for watching. So does Raina, because this is how she gets a lot of treats. She's down here now. And I want to say thank you to you for subscribing, liking, commenting, and giving me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you tuning in, and have a great day.